As I am not the OSHA expert, but I'm going to give you some background on that and some good resources. I've got a lot of links to sites and to some other places where you can get further information. The PPP loan forgiveness update, and I'll get a show of hands when we get to that to see if any of you have taken out those loans. If you haven't, we'll just kind of skip right over it. And then some different state, local, and county laws that we want to be aware of. And as I said, as we're going along, I'd like you to just jump in, raise your hand. Michelle, if you'd help, if you see some hands, because I've got to scroll through, so I can't necessarily see everybody. Or type it into the chat. We'll be looking for that.
Will do.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. So, okay, we got through what questions do you have. So let's talk about the FFRCA, which is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the Employer Paid Leave. How many of you are familiar with that? Just do a quick show of hands and I'm gonna scroll through as well. Well, some of you aren't showing us on the camera, so that's gonna make it a little bit trickier, but okay, that's all right. Have any of you had to implement that in your workplaces? Have you been impacted by somebody who's had the coronavirus? Show of hands? No. Okay, good. Hopefully you're keeping some healthy people there, so that's good. All right. And because some of you, I'm not sure if you're real familiar with it or if you're not, I'm going to go through it and give some detail. And let's talk about this just to make sure you're ready so you're not caught off guard. Or for the example that Jill had for us, I'm Jill, who's with the Small Business Development Center and has a lot of clients and does workshops. So we're not caught going, uh-oh, what do I do? And also this PowerPoint is much more text heavy than what I normally do, but because Michelle's going to send it out to you afterwards, it's got the information, links. So I just put a lot in there so that you've got references. But really, this was created, the FFRCA was created to help smaller employers, but you can see it's employers of fewer than 500 employees. So in some ways, it's not really that small of employers, which is good because it's designed to help employers have the opportunity to give their employees time off and be able to pay them and encourage them to go home. You need to quarantine if the doctor's saying that you need to quarantine. You need to do the things that you need to do to help us, work through this coronavirus and COVID-19, that we're experiencing. So, okay, I've got a few of them that we can see. How many of you are familiar with FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act? Okay, are any of you covered entities? Do you have more than 50 employees? Okay, we don't have that, but Family Medical Leave Act, there's some similarities to this and there's some big differences. So none of you are covered, what's called covered entity under Family Medical Leave Act, and that allows for unpaid leave if people need time off for a health condition. This is even better because employers of 500 or fewer employees, they are able to get some tax benefits and pay their employees under certain conditions. So we encourage them to go home, but then they're able to get paid as well. So when you get the PowerPoint, this quick tips, it's a really handy sheet. We're going to talk about it a little bit here as well. But what we want to do is make sure that we have an open door policy for our employees and make sure that they're aware of it. So those of you who said you are familiar with it, have you gotten your posters? There's a required poster that you need to put up in your workplaces. Some of you, yes, some of you know. Okay, I've got a resource for that. I'm going to jump down there right now. This is what the poster looks like, and I've got some resources for you. That's the first way that you want to have that open door policy and communicate to employees that they need to be able to come and talk to you, let you know if they are experiencing coronavirus themselves, or if they might have a family member that they are going to be responsible for, like especially a child who may have that and need to stay at home. So what's going to happen is you can pay them. So let's say one of your employees has the coronavirus, or let's go back to Jill's example. She's got the employer that they don't offer PTO, and that's okay, because a lot of times we don't. She has the employees, and let's assume they've been there for 30 days, and the employee comes to her with this open door policy. We've got the good communication, like, oh, I have either been exposed and I've been ordered to go into a quarantine situation, or I'm experiencing the symptoms, or I've gone and I've tested for coronavirus. And if they've been tested, it's really nice because you can ask the employee for some documentation. What is the physician saying that you need to do? And it likely will say they need to, quarantine for the 14 days. So that's where you want to document the situation. Say, okay, for the 14 days, I'm going to be able to pay you up to 80 hours. And there's some limits. It's up to $511 or $5,110 in total. And with that quick link that I showed you, it'll give you some of those numbers. But you're going to be able to continue to pay them whatever their regular wage is. So you want to detail the issue. You want to, have them, make that formal leave request. If they have that documentation from the doctor or the testing facility, that's even better. Ask them for that. We want to try to stay out of the business of being physicians and making determinations if they should be working or if they shouldn't. Leave that up to the medical professionals. Take a look at the business and personal aspects you considered. I mean, if the doctor says they have to go out, they have to go out. That's all there is to it. And what provision of the act are you following? So in this case that Jill brought forward, the person had actually, I believe she said they, had the symptoms and was tested, had the coronavirus. But there's other aspects. It could be that they have to care for someone, who has to quarantine. Or it could be that, and this one gets a little bit tricky, schools closing. So remember back in the spring when, okay, how many of you have children or have employees that have children that were impacted when all of a sudden they went out for spring break and they didn't get to go back to school? Anybody go through that? Okay, Donna, it was probably, or Dorna, sorry, it's really tiny. I'm in denial, I need glasses. Little bit difficult for the workplace because all of a sudden, yeah, your employees are struggling. And what am I gonna do? My children can't go to school and I'm used to this. So this is another aspect of FFRCA. It's designed if the schools are closed, and it's a little tricky because at what age does a parent need to be at home to really work with the child? If they're in elementary school, yeah, mom and dad probably need to be there, make sure that they're, going through the school work that they're supposed to do, daycare arrangements, and so forth. High school, I don't know, they should be able, maybe the parents really need to be home at that point, I don't know. But the employee could be eligible for up to 2/3 of their pay for up to an additional 10 weeks beyond that 2 weeks they had for their own health condition. But then it's only 2/3 of their pay. So it's a little bit tricky. It's either up to 80 hours full pay for their own health condition or the care of somebody who has, the coronavirus. So it's actually their health condition, or up to 2/3 of their pay, up to the limits. That's why I say up to stay home and work with their children when school is closed. A little more straightforward last spring, but now a lot of the schools are open, but they're having hybrid versions, or some of them it's just all online learning. So again, the parents are back in that situation where I've got my second grader, I really can't leave at home by themselves, but school isn't technically open or technically closed to fall under that. So what I typically will work with my clients, let's talk through the scenario. The key that we want to do is we want to be consistent with how we're applying the provision so that we're not saying, oh, I like Susan, so I'm going to go ahead and pay her the 2/3 pay and she can stay home and work with her children, but I don't like Sally, so I'm not going to do that for her. So we talk through it. What's the situation? Have you done anything so far to kind of establish your precedent? And then what makes sense, for the business going forward? And we try to work with the employee the best that we can to make sure that they can manage their home life, but we also have to keep the needs of the business going at the same time. So then we just document that and make sure we have everything, consistent and, why you made that decision. All right, so a few variables could be they have their own health issue, or they have to take care of somebody up to 80 hours of pay at their full pay, or they might have to stay home with a child who's school, or it could be daycare. We're not seeing too much of that now, but initially we were seeing the daycare was closed, so they have to stay home with them. And that's for up to an additional 10 weeks. So 2 weeks and 10 weeks. Okay, clear as mud, right? Makes sense to everybody? We got it? Kind of, sort of, yeah. Okay, then here's how you get paid. So, or you get reimbursed, you don't actually get paid. You keep paying them just like you normally do through your payroll system. And then you need to work with your accountant or your tax preparer really closely, because you're going to get a tax credit when you file your taxes from the IRS. And so that's how you, in essence, get reimbursed, so that you're not out the money for that. Make sense? This is that hard part because I can't see you. And most of you don't even have the camera on there. So, okay. I'm going to give you a second. If you have questions, type something in the chat box or raise your hand or take it off mute so we can have any questions.
I have a quick question.
Great.
So what happens after 10 weeks? Because say in my situation, my children go to KCPS and they're it's online learning, so virtually, and they're my older one is they're both, well, one's kindergarten, one's pre-K, but they're both within KCPS the school district. And for now, everything's online learning until next year. And I'm assuming in January, we're probably going to go through this until May. So that's longer than 10. Well, I've gone past 10 weeks already. So what happens in that case?
That's the tough part. After the 10 weeks, the employer is not obligated to continue that 2/3 of pay. So that's the really tricky part. And so if somebody doesn't have, PTO with their employer, paid time off, so that they're able to use that, that's the really tough part. And right now, the way the law stands, it's just up to that additional 10 weeks, I'm sorry to say. And then they're not obligated to pay. Yeah. So, and it's really tough right now because obviously you don't want to leave your kindergartner and pre-K at home, and things keep changing so much with the schools. So I would just keep, if you're the employer, if you're the employee, keep having that open dialogue with your employer, talking to him about what's going on, potentially when the changes are coming. I know different districts are using different gating community or criteria and different, time intervals for when they're saying, we're going to go for 2 weeks and then we'll let you know. It's been really tough for parents and for employers, trying to balance all of that. So keep that open dialogue with the employers. Employers, keep that open dialogue with your employees and try to work around the best way that you can so that we can manage the business and manage the home life as well. So good question.
I have one more question also. I'm sorry.
Okay, Lorna, go ahead and then we'll go to Lori.
Oh, sorry. So for the PTO, what if somebody has, you have paid time off, you have the PTO available, and somebody comes in and says they have COVID or they're asked to quarantine, then do you ask them to use their time off, or do you pay them and still reserve their vacation on sick days?
Yeah, I would recommend that you use the provision of the FRCCA and pay them through that approach and get the tax credit for a couple of reasons. It really helps your employee engagement. People are going to feel good about that. You're not saying, well, I know you have this other, well, they may or may not know, but let's assume they know that we have this other provision. Well, you're not using it. You're making me use up my PTO, and I might need it again later because I know one person, she had to quarantine 3 times. That, luckily never came down with COVID, but she's had to 3 times. And for an employee engagement perspective, people feel better about that. I might want to take a vacation. Should we, be starting to do that again? But from an employee engagement and really keeping your employees committed to your business, try to use the resources you can to be able to pay for that, and then, let them keep that back later. And they want to use the PTO. It's the same situation with any PTO situation. You go through your usual process. Well, who else has the time off? Can you, get that time off right then, because we need to manage the business. So that would just be managed like anything else, unless they had another situation where they had to quarantine. Obviously, you have to let them go do that. So, all right. Is that good, Dorna? Make sense? Okay. Lori, you had a question.
I do. Is there any truth? I thought I remember when all this started, that the employers, it's less than 500 employees, or is it more than 50 but less than 500? Is there truth to that you had to have more than 50? So if you had less than 50 employees, then you are exempt, I guess. Is that the right word?
There are a couple of provisions, but they're pretty darn limited to exempt somebody, and it's not tied around the 50. It's tied around, type of business and so forth. So really, we pretty much, for the most part, the 50 I think got lumped in there because that's the number for the family medical. It's only 50 or more employees. So this is really taken down into a much smaller number. And really the intent is to help employers and employees and help those employers be able to provide a paid time off where they've never had that before. For smaller employers, that hasn't been an opportunity. So we'd like to try to look from that beneficial, perspective.
Right. Okay.
It looks like Michelle Sanders might have a question. Her hand is up. Is that correct, Michelle? You can unmute if you'd like. I could be wrong. I just saw the raised hand, but well, Michelle, if you do, just pop in or put it in chat and I'll let Karen know what it is as well.
Great, thanks. Okay, and let me pop down to the last one. There is, of course, notification. We have to communicate to our employees. So there is a poster. It's not a very good graphic I have there because my snippet tool kind of blurry. But here's where I gave you 3 different resources to order these posters. I know in the last workshop that I did, some folks had not ordered these. They're not very expensive. By law, you need to order the poster and make it available to your employees in a place where you normally post all of your employment law posters so that they know what their rights are. So before I was saying they might know, they might not know about their rights if they have this poster and if they read it. Now you can't force them to read it. You know how you can, give them the information, but that's up there. I have used Labor Law Center, very good experience. They don't try to oversell you. Back in the day, I used JJ Keller. They're pretty good too. I know nothing about Compliance Poster Company. So that's just my disclaimer, but I had to provide you with 3. So there's your 3. So take your pick there. So if you haven't ordered that poster yet, please do that because you're legally obligated to do that. And so that will help make sure employees are aware of their rights as well. So again, not exciting stuff, but really important. And I know in the last workshop we had, there were some people feverishly writing that down, and this will come to you when Michelle emails it to you as well. So you'll have all these resources. So, okay, we feeling good on FFRCA? Considering we're halfway through? Okay, all right. This kind of dovetails off of it a little bit, and I just wanted to touch on this, HIPAA and confidentiality. HIPAA really has more of a focus and more of an impetus, and I know Lori can speak to this, and I don't know how many others are in the healthcare industry, but being a covered entity, when you provide medical services, it's very limited on what you can talk about patients' medical information or your employees' medical information. But even if you're not a covered entity, under HIPAA, there's still a HIPAA provision that applies to all employers, and that's the confidentiality, and that you're not running around the office telling everybody about somebody's condition. So for employers, here's what you need to look at. There could be a possibility that you may, need to, have an employee come to you and, they're going to be talking about this situation, like we said earlier, that open door policy. As it relates to maybe contact tracing, I always recommend on here, and I'm going to talk some more about this, follow the health department guidelines for notification because that's changing all the time. And I'm going to put this in later, but I'm going to say it now. I don't know if you all are working with your county health department because there's different folks we can go to for resources, but they're, at least in Johnson County, I know I've got a couple of clients who work with them. They're really good and they'll let you know what you need to do from a notification and contact tracing perspective. Covered entities, but then just don't talk to other employees about it. Just like if somebody, had another medical condition, just in normal times, they had a heart attack or, a hernia operation or whatever the case may be, you don't want to tell people about that. That's not your place as the employer. So limited information, just a need to know of what people might need to know. That's what you need to tell them. And otherwise, Joe's just out for a couple of weeks. Covered entities. So if we do have employers who are considered covered entities under HIPAA, what should be disclosed? Potentially, they might have to let law enforcement know or paramedics, first responders, public health officials, really from an exposure perspective. If, one of these types of folks, first responders coming out to your workplace because there's a call, just so that they know if there is potentially a COVID situation that they need to be aware of. But really, for the most part, most of us, we just follow our typical confidentiality that we normally have. Does that make sense? Give me a quick show of hands. Yeah, good. Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Thank you. Darn, I appreciate it. You're really good with that thumbs up there. So I appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to move on to the OSHA reporting because this is all kind of tying in together. And again, lots of links for you so that you can get out to different sites. My disclaimer is I am not the OSHA expert. My first job out of graduate school was working in the safety department for one of the Chrysler plants. So my focus was heavily on OSHA. So I know enough now that I know that we need to make sure we're following OSHA, but I am not the expert. And I didn't put any resources in here because I only know one because he's really good. So I don't know others. So that we can get you some other resources if you need it. But this gets a little bit tricky. How many of you are familiar with OSHA and OSHA recording if you have injuries in your workplace? I've got so few hands there. Okay, so I'm making some assumptions here that you're familiar with this. There's some specific criteria around COVID-19 cases. And this gets a little technical here. I took it right off of the OSHA website and I got real technical. It's the requirements of FRC Part 1904, which is OSHA's part that they put in for COVID cases. So I'm just going to kind of go through it. But there's some very encouraging things about what OSHA said and what you need to do and not do. So really what it's going to look at, and the tricky part, and even on the OSHA website, CDC website, they'll say it's difficult oftentimes to really be able to identify the source of a COVID-19 case. Let's say you have an employee who comes in and says, yep, you know, I've been diagnosed, you know, I have COVID-19. Did they get that in the workplace? Did they not get that in the workplace? So there's, you know, some definitions around that the CDC has put out. But think of it this way, it's kind of a high level. If it's a one-off situation, let's say you've got 20 employees and you have one person have that situation, but nobody else ends up, you know, with COVID symptoms or anything. The CDC and OSHA kind of look at that as, in all likelihood, you know, you're going to want to do an investigation, ask them where they've been, have others in the workplace been exposed, because could there be, you know, some potential danger for your employees. But if they really haven't, you know, and it looks like for all intents and purposes, they probably got that at a gathering that they went to over the weekend. You know, they had a big family gathering or they went to an establishment. Then it's not likely going to be a recordable case because it's not something that happened in the workplace. They just happened to bring it into the workplace. Now, if it is work related and, you know, there's you know, different things that we're hearing where we have workplaces that are more conducive to having more spreading, where it's hard to have the social distancing and so forth. If you start to have a number of people that have the symptoms and or are diagnosed with COVID, it may be identified that it is coming out of your place of employment, and then it may be a requirement to have to record that as an OSHA recordable illness. And so then there's the general criteria for that. So I give you a bunch of links because, again, I'm not going to be the expert on it, but what I like to make sure people are aware of is that there could be some OSHA recording requirements for you, and you need to at least be aware of that and say, oh, if I do have a situation, I'm going to have to learn a little bit more about what I need to do. But a couple of things I put in the OSHA webpage encouraged about that came from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Now, they don't have an expectation, Department of Health and Human Services or OSHA, that smaller employers are going to be experts in being able to conduct investigations, know the criteria, really know how to go about investigating a potential OSHA scenario. So who thinks that's the good news? They're not expecting, if you have like 10 employees, maybe 20, that you're going to be really good at this. So I thought that was good. I was excited to see that they have realistic expectations of what you're going to know. What I've also found too is, you know, they've got some updates. So here, the frequently check out this website. It's going to give you updates and guidance, you know, around what may be OSHA recordable and what may not. You just want to make sure if you are supposed to be recording something in your OSHA 300 log that you're actually doing that properly. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then we're going to need to get you some resources afterwards to make sure that that you're doing the recording. Does that sound okay? That's my OSHA bit. Okay, we good with me to move on? Do I need the thumbs up or the, okay, got the head nods. Okay, very good. All right, Paycheck Protection Program. I'm going to spend a little bit time on this because I only have a couple of you, but are you familiar with the PPP, which not to be confused with PPE, you know, our personal protective equipment, and then we have our Paycheck Protection Program. So who came up with these acronyms? Because they're too close to each other. But the Paycheck Protection Program, is anybody taking advantage of that? Familiar with it? And
I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with it at all.
Okay, all right. Well, unfortunately, we're past that time frame. I don't know if we're past that time frame. You can check with your banker to see if you still can apply for that. It really came out in about the March, April time frame, where a lot of monies were made available to businesses to help them stay open, to keep their employees on the payroll, so we wouldn't see such a huge mass, you know, layoffs and unemployment and so forth. And so a number of organizations were able to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, and they were able to get monies that they could then use to pay their employees. They couldn't use it to go on a trip to Cabo or anything fun like that. Yeah, I know. Well, at the time, I don't think anybody was traveling anyhow. But yeah, it was designed so that employers could continue to keep their employees on the payroll and not have to lay them off right away. So just want to let people know that now the window has opened up for the loan forgiveness program, because that was the whole intent when it first came out, that employers were going to get these loans and that in all likelihood, it would be a forgivable loan, you know, down the road. So now we're at the down the road. The window just opened early October, and there are some provisions around that. So hopefully everybody worked with their banker, because all of the different banks, large banks, small banks, if they wanted to, they were participating in the PPP program, giving those loans out. But just want to make sure, and again, I'm not sure how many of you this is impacting, so I'll keep it kind of high level and quick. Want to make sure, here's where you can get the information about it. And there's some new criteria, especially for the loans that were less than 50,000. It was all based on what your total salary was. So you could have been a small employer, but you still might have had a pretty high salary salary levels that you had and payroll. So 50,000 or more or less, really simple process right now, from what I understand. I've only started the process myself. But here's just a few helpful links. And this I think will work out well because I'm not sure how many of you it's impacting. But there's the links. There's a loan, I won't do that. The loan forgiveness application, there's instructions, that's your second one. Then there's a different way that and different set of instructions and different forms you fill out if your loan was less than 50,000 or more than $50,000. And your banker should be really good about talking with you and working with you on that as well. There's also been a lot come out from some of the different small business administrations. Michelle and Jill, I think we've sent some out from the UMKC Small Business Development Center. I know I've seen some from the Johnson County Community College Group.
Yes, the clients can reach out to their coaches, and our recommendation is to reach out to the lender that they got the PPP from, because each bank may have a back office forgiveness form to utilize that may not be similar to what we would send to them. So it may be bank specific as well too.
Absolutely.
But they can reach out to us to help them go through that program.
We also did an SBA co-facilitated Q&A panel about PPP forgiveness, and that is on our YouTube
Perfect.
Site, the recording of that webinar.
Great, good. Yeah, so use those different resources. Like your banker or lender, they're the ones who really will be able to get you through, you know, what the criteria is for what you have, but get some background on it, and you've got some great resources. And if you're not getting the answers that you think you should get, I'm not going to mention my banker, but they are not particularly helpful. I won't mention any names, So I would probably reach out to somebody else, my, Small Business Development Center advisor, or somebody who can help point me in the right direction and make sure that I'm asking the right questions and getting the right information. But hopefully all of you have really fabulous bankers and they are on it and they're, walking you through the whole process. So, all right. Enough information on that. This is where I usually look for the glazed eyes to say, okay, got it, move on. The head nods like, yep, time to move on. Okay, all right. State and local laws and some good business practices. So here's some of the things that I have my clients reaching out and asking about. They're taking a look at, what are the mask mandates? Well, it's interesting because here we are right here on the state line, and Kansas has a different mandate than the state of Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri has a different mandate, than the state of Missouri. So you need to keep updated on what are the mask mandates and what are the expectations in the state that you're in, or the county that you're in, or the municipality that you're in, because that's going to drive what you need to be doing in terms of your employees and the requirements for them. And then if you are client facing, if you have customers or clients that come into your business, maybe retail, the requirements you have around there, and you can decide, you can put a sign on the door that maybe you're in Missouri. This is really interesting. I did do a little bit of traveling over the summer, just quick up to my mom's, out of state and then back again. So we had to stop for gas a couple of times because we went to Michigan. So, it's a little bit of a drive. Every state we were going through, except Missouri, they all had the mask mandates. And so we're just used to it. And I mean, I don't have it with me because it's in the car, but I was used to just putting on my mask. I was doing that before it was a mandate in Kansas. And then we stopped to get gas and a little ice cream at the Baskin Robbins in Missouri. And we walked in, I was like, okay, what's going on? Probably a quarter of the people had the masks on, and it just looked so funny at that point. We were in Missouri, I realized there's not a mask mandate there. Luckily, all their employees had that on. So you can, even if you're in Missouri, you can require that your employees wear that mask, for safety. Because it's interesting, I'll take a step back to OSHA. OSHA has a general duty clause. You are obligated to provide a safe work environment for your employees, whatever that means for your type of business. So if it's manufacturing, like I came out of, that has more, risks than, some other businesses have. The advising that I do, not a terribly risky business. But retail or in your own business, you can ask that people do that. And you can do that because it's your business. But if you do have that mandate in your state or your local municipality or your county, make sure you follow it, because you have to follow it then. Same thing with social distancing. I know it's been really tricky. Things have changed as we've learned more about coronavirus, but right now, we look to the CDC, and the next slide, I'm really going to emphasize your county health departments. I know I've mentioned that once, but use them again. They are really wonderful resources to be able to find out what is the latest, because you hear a lot of different things if you watch the news. So find out what that social distancing is, the best that you can, try to protect your employees. Working from home when possible. A lot of employers are doing that now for the types of businesses where it's conducive for people to be able to go work from home. And I know that doesn't work for every business. You have, patients, your practice, you have customers who come into your building or your restaurant and so forth. Working from home may not be an option, but where it is, I like to encourage my clients to offer that option and be respectful. If somebody's not comfortable coming in, remember back to the confidentiality and kind of around the Hipaa, we don't necessarily know the health information and the medical situation that each of our employees are in. And they may or may not be comfortable sharing that with you. Or they may have, elderly, parents at home. You'll probably know that. They tend to talk about that more. But be respectful. I've coached a lot of clients around, how am I going to handle this? I want people to come back into the workplace. I like having us there. I like the camaraderie and the brainstorming, but I have some folks that aren't comfortable. So where you can, I'm always recommending try to work that out. I know some employers, they might have specific teams and they might come in one day a week. That's a really nice best practice I've seen a lot of companies doing, where they need to collaborate and work together. but they don't necessarily have to come in and be around everybody else. So it's this group comes in on Monday, and another group comes in on Tuesday. So those are some different ideas, that we have and where possible. You're going to see I have on there, communicate, communicate, communicate. That's a real key, not just during COVID, but anytime. And, it's really important to let people know what's going on in the workplace, what you're doing to keep them safe, how you're going about getting your information. So I'm going to jump down a slide and then I'll come back. What resources are you using? So I gave you some links to the OSHA site, the CDC site. I don't know which county you're in, so I didn't put all the county sites in there, but the county health departments. Let your employees and your team members know you're not just making this up as you're going along. You're looking to the experts to give you guidance around this. But back to the communicating, let them know here's what's going on. Have them, have that open door policy where they're comfortable coming in to speak with you about what's going on, their concerns and their fears. Let me ask you this, because I've talked a lot. How many of you are finding that your employees are pretty comfortable coming and talking to you about concerns or fears that they have with regard to the workplace and COVID-19? Any of you feeling people are pretty comfortable? Okay, I'm seeing some hands up. If you have ideas, if you can share, what have you done to really help create that, that fostering that environment of people being comfortable to come and talk to you? Yeah, Lori, let's take you off mute and one of us did.
I think just from the beginning, we've always just been open and let everybody come to us with their ideas, with their concerns, with any information that they have that they've found, whether like resources, because this was so new for everybody. And it was so unknown for everybody. So if anybody had any information or ideas or suggestions or anything, we were very open to them. And I think that may help make everybody more comfortable coming to us. And we took everybody's suggestion. We didn't shut anybody down or anything. We just took everybody's information and just kind of brought it all together in meetings and stuff like that. We had a lot of Zoom meetings, and I want to say a lot, we had a few Zoom meetings, and just kind of brainstormed together to come up with our plans and what was going to work here in our practice. And I think it helped make everybody feel comfortable, and just kind of let everybody know that we're all in this together and all in the same boat. And we've always had an open door policy regardless here in our practice. People have always felt comfortable coming to us about anything. But then I think with this being so huge, I think just making everybody feel comfortable and safe, just from the get-go, I think that really helped for us.
Great. Laura, I appreciate you sharing that. A couple of aspects I really want to hone in on. You've had an open door policy all along, so it makes it a lot easier for people to be comfortable, like, oh, this is one new, pretty significant, but one new topic that we're going to talk about, and that's good. Another thing I really wanted to commend you on was your ability to ask your team members, okay, what are you hearing? What's going on? Make sure we're all understanding the correct information and what's going to work for all of us here. Right. Because when you open that up to your employees and you ask them, what's going to work for you? What are your concerns? Yeah, we can do that. Okay, let's look at that. Once people have had that input, they are now part of the solution. They own it. They're going to adhere to it.
Right.
Yeah. Totally different situation than you come in and say, okay, we're going to do this and this and this and this. And people are like, whoa, wait a minute, what? And I don't think that's going to work. So good job for doing that, because are they following along with what everybody agreed with?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Been nice.
Yeah. Great job on doing that. So if others of you haven't done that so much, it's absolutely fine. Ask your employees and, let them know. Sometimes I'll do this, no guarantees. Going to be able to do this or implement this or follow this along, but bring up the ideas and let's brainstorm it. Let's see what's going to work, and we'll get to a place where we can come to a good solution for all of us. And people really appreciate that. I kind of mentioned a little bit here. We'll get into this more in our next couple of workshops that, again, are much more engaging, and you'll talk more than what we've done here. But talking about that employee engagement, And employee engagement is so important because that's how you get people to come in excited about doing their jobs and giving 100 and 110% to your organization. And they want to stay. They're not thinking about, oh, well, I don't know, I didn't handle this COVID situation very well. I think I better go look for another job. So we'll talk more about employee engagement over the next couple of weeks when we're together again. So great.
Karen, Patricia has a question.
Oh, good. Patricia,
Hi.
what's on your mind?
Hey, Karen. So quick question, hopefully quick question. So we own an adult daycare in Jackson County, and our practice so far has been, you know, when someone comes in with COVID, we shut down for 2 weeks to quarantine. And it's kind of getting costly now because of course we're out of the tax, you know, the 2-week tax thing, and you know, it's hard to pay the employees. So what advice would you give a company like mine? Do we shut down every 2 weeks when someone, I mean, each time they've had it, no one else has gotten it, but I mean, do we continue to do that 2-week quarantine? Like what advice could you give me?
Yeah, I'm going to totally pass the buck here. So I'm just going to admit this, but I would be working very closely. You're in Jackson County, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you reached out to them? Do you have a person on speed dial that you can talk to at Jackson County, the health department?
Do you want the honest answer? It's, you know, pass you around to other people, other companies, other, you know what I mean? So no one ever really gives you consistent advice. And that's, you know, down from all the way in the beginning. They told us to call the CDC. The CDC said, contact your local health department. So there's really no one that can give you consistent advice.
I'm really sorry to hear that because I have a client that at daycare, but not adults, you know, little people, but it's in Johnson County, and they have their person, they pretty much have them on speed dial. They're on the phone with them probably 3 times a week because each scenario turns out to be a little bit different. And then the guidance changes, right? So yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that you're not getting that same support and service because if you're in Johnson County, so those of you who are, sorry, Patricia, it's probably going to hear, darn, they're really good about giving that guidance. So you know, if you can't get that guidance at the county health department, you know, I don't know if within, you know, the CDC itself, that gets to be such a large organization, but I would just keep checking the CDC websites as well as the county website if they have dated information there. And
so the guidance is usually, you know, get the test or quarantine for the 7 to 10 days.
mm-hmm.
But do we shut down every single time and quarantine for 7 to 10 days every single time someone is tested positive, even though it's not, I mean, like, do we just continue to shut down for 2 weeks each time, or are we able to stay open and extra social distance?
Yeah, and you know, that's on a case-by-case basis. I'm totally moving around this one because I'm not in a position to be able to tell you need to do this or you need to do this because it's your business, and I am not the one who's giving the scientific, you know, and putting out those guidelines, right? So you know, you can't say Karen Hughey said to do this because I could be wrong. So that's why I'm not really answering your question. I am so sorry, and I'm not really going to answer your question.
Well, can I ask you another question then? Maybe
yes,
you can answer this one.
Yeah,
and that is
I hope so.
That's so fair. So thank you anyway. But
Okay.
So with the PPP loan, and I'm sorry if I'm backing up a little bit.
Okay. No, it's fine.
With the PPP loan, I went through cabbage.com to do it just
Okay.
because I did it like in the very beginning before the banks were opening up and all that. But I've been really watching Cabbage closely, and I actually just got off their website, and they don't have the application out yet. They're saying it's not out there yet. And I know that's not true. So how do you, like, can I apply for that without going through Cabbage because they just don't have it open to where we can go through them?
Yeah, that's interesting that they don't have it open because you have to go back through whoever your lender was. And, you know, in this case, it was Cabbage. They're the ones that you have to go back and submit to. So I'm not sure why they aren't saying that it isn't out there and isn't available yet. Available. And like I said, my banker has not been the best either, but they even knew, and they sent out an email and said, okay, it's open. So I would check back with Cabbage. Did you by chance have anybody you were working with at Cabbage when you initially applied for the PPP?
No, it was online. It was just an online process, and they approved you online, and everything was via email. And then whenever you call them, it's it's, you know, it rings, and it might send over to a voicemail, but you can never really get anybody on the phone.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe Jill or Michelle can help me. Who, like from a governmental agency perspective, might have some way to be able to circumvent in to find out if a lender, is that the FTC, or who do we need to go to say we're not getting the right information if Cabbage is saying it's not available? They might not have it ready yet, but.
I just contacted Patricia to let her know I'll connected with her SBDC counselor. This kind of an in-depth question, but Jill, if you have something else to quickly add, please do.
And I am actually her counselor, Michelle. So,
Yeah. I'll just call you later, Jill.
Yeah, please do, because I do have a response to that.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Great, thanks, Jill. Okay. All right, what other questions? All right. We have a number of resources in this PowerPoint that we're going to send out to you. And I encourage you to come back for the next couple of weeks, because we will be doing a lot more talking and engaging and you know, really open up even more. So I appreciate those of you who shared, you know, some of your best practices on what's worked well for you during this crazy time. We'll keep talking even more and sharing some more of those best practices in our next workshop. So less of me just talking, and more of us all working together to really, you know, improve our businesses. Oh, and I would like to encourage you to sign up for the one-on-one counseling. I'm really excited about that, and they're offering that. It's a great deal. So that you can talk about anything. So whatever you've got going. Now, it might be like Patricia's case, where I'm unfortunately not going to tell you a recommendation on if you should close or open with COVID, but just about anything else that's in my purview, you know, which is just about anything in HR. You know, I've either done it, I work with it right now with clients and so forth. And, you know, and or I'll have my 3 resources I can send you to, because I don't do staffing per se, like actual staffing and work that process, but I do a lot of strategy with clients. And it's a whole new ballgame out there now. You know, we're going to talk about that, you know, in our hiring workshop. But pre-COVID, how many of you were having a hard time finding good, qualified candidates who actually want to show up and work, you know, 5 days a week, if that's how often you have them work? Yeah. Better situation now. We've got some people out there, but depending on if you need the really specialized training, you still have that situation. But yeah, a lot going on now. And we've got some ideas on, you know, different industries that are down for a while and are going to stay down for a while. And so, you know, places where you might be able to go find some really great employees that just can't work in their industry because it's not coming back for a bit because of the situation. So yeah, we'll have a lot more dialogue and discussion in our next workshops.
Thank
Well,
you.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Karen, for being here. And we will, like you said, see most of you all back next week. And I have put the information in the chat a few times about how to reach out for the one-on-one sessions with Karen, or to get connected with a business coach within our network for other issues outside of HR. And I believe that's it. We can close out today unless there's any last minute questions. Everybody's pretty quiet.
I know.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Hey, have a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Karen. Thank you.
Bye, Lori.